Hello and welcome to Nothing But the Truth. How do senior congressmen respond to Mr. Modi's first speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort as Prime Minister of India? That's the key issue I shall explore today with the Congress Party's former HRD Law Minister as well as Communications and Science and Technology Minister, Kapil Sibal. Mr. Sibal, let me start with a simple question. There were enormous expectations around Mr. Modi's first speech. Now that it's over, are you impressed or are you disappointed?
Well, I think he's a master of sound bites. But whether he's a master of substance or not, I'm not too sure of that.
So are you saying that as far as substance goes, you're disappointed?
As far as sound bites goes, I'm impressed, but there's no substance in any of this.
What about the delivery? The Prime Minister spoke extempore for 65 minutes. His style was conversational, informal. Many people believed he seemed to be directly addressing the people of India. Now, did that work for you, or did you think it was too casual an approach for such a formal occasion?
In the long-term delivery, whether you speak extempore, Vajpayee ji used to read his speech. So it's a different idiom, a different methodology that he's adopting. That really doesn't matter. I don't really care whether somebody speaks extempore or not. I think what really matters is what's the substance of what he's saying.
All right, let's then come to the substance of the Prime Minister's speech. He began by saying that he was an outsider to Delhi, and he said he was astonished to find that instead of the union government being cohesive and united, it was a series of mini governments often quarreling with each other, often disputing, frequently taking each other to court. Do you accept that characterization of the central government?
Well, I don't think that happens all the time, but there are certainly issues that arise. Say, for example, Ministry of Tourism wants to do something which the Ministry of Environment opposes, right? And somebody files a petition in court. Obviously, the Ministry of Environment's view is different from that of the Ministry of Tourism. Take the Ministry of Coal and the Ministry of Mines and the Ministry of Power. Sometimes you have a power project with a coal linkage, and the coal is not being supplied, and the coal ministry says, I don't have coal to supply because I have other priorities. So this is inherent in government functioning when there is scarcity of resources.
If it is inherent in government functioning and therefore in a way understandable, is Mr. Modi making too much of the point? Because he picked it out as something that suggests sclerosis.
I don't think that's quite right. These things happen. Even in a court of law, sometimes you have dissenting judges, no? Even in respect to a very important national matter.
So Mr. Modi...
there are points of view that are different from other ministries.
So Mr. Modi was making too much of this. He was in a sense exaggerating it.
Perhaps, but I think what he was trying to say was government should be more cohesive. As a larger objective, that's good. But if you don't allow dissent, then you will not have a cohesive policy.
And there's a danger inherent in this point that Mr. Modi made, that he might disallow dissent. He might force through one man's view.
Could be.
Could be. You share that as a genuine fear?
Could be.
Now, in the more political passages of the speech, Mr. Modi reached out to the opposition. He praised previous governments. He said that he wanted to rule on the basis of consensus, not majority. Analysts said that this was a clear note of reconciliation, that he was trying to draw a line behind the divisive election we've had.
I think that people should now know by now that when Mr. Modi says something, he doesn't necessarily mean it. For example, he talks about Sadbhavna, Bhaichara, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Whose Saath and whose Vikas are we talking about? He talks about no communal tensions, but see what happened in Muzaffarnagar. One of the people in his cabinet is a person who's a potential accused. I mean, he's been charged with what happened in Muzaffarnagar.
I'll come to communal tensions in a moment's time. I want to bring them up as a separate issue. But first, on this question of political reaching out to the opposition, praising previous governments, you say here Mr. Modi says things he doesn't mean.
No, I don't. What is reaching out? I mean, what was the hurry and many of the things that he's been doing? I think what he's trying to do is selling something to the public, but in reality, what we see on the ground is something entirely different.
So he's conveying the image of being a political reconciler, but his behavior is not one of reconciliation.
I wouldn't go to that extent, but he's a master of sound bites. I'll repeat it.
And this is just sound bites?
It's a sound bite.
Let's come to the points Mr. Modi made, and he made them quite elaborately about communal harmony, about brotherliness and togetherness. Do you believe that was a sufficient response to the spate of communal incidents we've seen, which have worried the country, and on which, up to now, the Prime Minister has been completely silent?
He has absolutely said nothing. That's why I don't understand. He says something on the from the ramparts of Lal Killa, But what happens, what BJP is doing in Uttar Pradesh and areas especially which are going to the by-polls is something entirely different. So you see, the words must match the deeds.
Is this a case of misleading sound bites, or would you go one step further and say this is hypocrisy?
Well, you know, I don't want to, you know, just one day after independence, I don't want to be, you know, that critical of Modi. I think people should start learning to figure out what he really means and what he doesn't mean. I think this is yet another election speech from the ramparts of Lal Killa.
You're sure this is just election?
It's just an election speech.
You don't think this is prime ministerial?
No, I don't want to say that, but it's yet another election speech. Point is, he's good at this, and he connects with people on this issue. But unfortunately, what's happening on the ground is entirely different.
You know, both with regard to the points Mr. Modi made about political reconciliation reaching across the divide to the opposition, as well as with regard to his comments about communal harmony, you're saying that what he says is different to what he does. His sound bites are reconciliatory, his behavior is often adversarial.
Well, that's what I have figured out in the last several years.
So there are two faces to Mr. Modi.
There are many faces to Mr. Modi, and I think you will start recognizing them as time goes by.
The face that makes the speeches and gives the sound bites is sometimes a deceptive face.
Well, I don't know about that, but the face that makes the speeches, people have bought that face for the moment. And
Let me put the opposite of my questions to you. What would it have taken from Mr. Modi to convince you that he's serious about brotherliness, togetherness and communal harmony, that he actually meant all of this, that he meant it when he called for a 10-year moratorium on caste and communal
Well,
strife?
make sure that the RSS doesn't do what it is doing. Make sure that what's happening in Uttar Pradesh is not happening, or Maharashtra for that matter, or even in Gujarat, what has happened in Gujarat. What's the reconciliation he's talking about? People are still there, you know, living in the same set of conditions. And people are afraid, actually, today. And what has happened in Uttar Pradesh is something shocking. All the Muslim workmen, whether it's Faizabad or it's, you know, any other place, all the Muslims, actually the sugar factories don't have any labor anymore because of the tension between communities. And the country has lost out. So and he's talking about reconciliation.
So what you're saying is, if you mean the words of reconciliation that he spoke from the ramparts of the Red Fort, rein in the VHP, rein in the RSS,
exactly.
rein in BJP
exactly.
workers.
Make sure that the Muslim is not afraid, that people are not afraid of going to work. Make sure that there is no tension between communities.
How Muslims respond is the test of Mr. Modi's sincerity.
No, it's not how Modi responds to the situation is the test of his sincerity, not how Muslims respond.
And that test you think he's failing?
At the moment, it seems that the sound bites are different from the reality.
Now, in economic terms, for many people, the most striking part of that speech was his emphasis on manufacturing, encapsulated in a sense by that phrase, come make in India, sell anywhere in the world that you want. Do you see that as a convincing sign of new economic orientation, or just another soundbite?
No, but this is the UPA's policy of manufacturing. Manufacturing contributes, you know, just about 20% of the GDP of this country, and we've been saying, Dr. Manmohan Singh had been saying time and again that this is where India has to move. It has to move. Actually,
you don't think Modi put a new emphasis on it, a new forcefulness behind it?
No, this is exactly what we've been doing. This has been our policy framework, and we've done a lot about it.
So here the emperor has borrowed your clothes?
Absolutely, without any doubt. In fact, most of what he said yesterday is just what we've been doing.
Let me explore that point a little further. Mr. Modi, in his speech from the Red Fort, laid a lot of emphasis on import substitution, on increasing exports almost exponentially. He said he wanted to see made in India products in every corner of the world. Many analysts say this is a reasonably clear sign that in the near future we're going to see far-reaching reforms in terms of labor laws, in terms of land acquisition. Would you welcome that if it happens?
No, I would welcome anything that takes the economy forward, especially the manufacturing sector. Why? Because that's where jobs will be created. In the absence of jobs, what will millions of young people who come out of universities do? Therefore, we support this, and this is exactly what our UPA policies were.
Except that he may be pursuing it with greater thrust than you pursued it earlier.
What's the thrust? We set up community colleges only for the purposes of skilling our people. We decided. See, now he's talking about FDI. If you bring in more FDI, there'll be less made in India brands.
So there's
there's confusion in this. You bring more FDI into the system, there'll be less made in India brand.
So the main point you're making about the economic aspects of Mr. Modi's speech is that in fact A, it's not clear, and B, he's borrowing your clothes.
Exactly. It's not clear at all what he really means by made in India. How are you going to have things made in India unless you set up manufacturing in India? How do you set up manufacturing in India?
The pink papers, the white papers, industrialists, economists have all praised him for what he said about the economy. They do want to see how he'll deliver.
Exactly.
But you're not even giving him credit for what he said.
Because this is what we have been doing, actually on the ground. Actually on the ground. This industrial corridor we are talking about. Industrial corridor, Mumbai, Delhi industrial corridor, what is it?
It's all yours.
Setting up cities, what is it?
It's all yours.
It's all ours.
All right.
Bringing the Japanese into the economy is all ours. The Prime Minister visited Japan, Prime Minister Abe is very keen to collaborate with India. I'm very happy that Prime Minister Modi is going to Japan, but this is all what we've been doing.
So he's following on the path that you laid out.
Exactly.
Do you give him any credit for walking faster than you did, walking with better determination?
I want to give him credit. I want to see that credit on the ground
but
when he
walks the talk. But as yet you can't.
I only hear sound bites. I want to see when he walks the talk.
For many people, one of the most striking announcements made in the budget, my apologies, one of the most striking announcements made in the Independence Day speech was the abolition of the Planning Commission. The Prime Minister has said he'll replace it with a new institution, but he hasn't given any details. Do you think the Planning Commission had outlived its utility, or has the PM made a mistake?
See, I am not sure about this for myself, because I really do not know exactly whether the Planning Commission has outlived its utility or not. But certainly we needed a reform of the Planning Commission, and our government itself was contemplating
so
that.
This you welcome.
I think Montek actually moved a paper in order to say that the system needs reform. Now, what it will be replaced with is what's important. You see, you can do away with things. What's important is what you replace them with.
We don't know what it's going to be replaced with, so let's leave that out, because that we can only come to when he announces his intentions. But you said something very important before that. You're saying that your own government had intended to reform the Planning Commission, that Montek Singh Ahluwalia had moved a paper to do so.
Yes.
So once again, Mr. Modi is taking your ideas up and fulfilling them.
I mean, I think all institutions need reform as time goes on. And I think Modi is right in saying that the Planning Commission also needs reform.
Except for the fact that no one heard the thought that the Planning Commission needs to be reformed so clearly in your days when you were in power. In Mr. Modi's time, he's not only talked about reform, he's abolished it, and yet you say he's following your path.
Because of the fact that, our Prime Minister would silently work. This Prime Minister is very vocal about what he perhaps has not yet done. That's the difference.
That's a very critical thing you've just said. You stand by it.
Of course I stand by it.
Mr. Modi, in his speech yesterday, announced 3 policies. I want to put each of them one by one to you to see your response. First was the Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana, which guarantees a bank account to all poor people with a debit card as well as 1 lakh of insurance. Is that achievable, or is it too ambitious?
First of all, he has to embrace Aadhaar for that, which they were opposing when they were not in power. How can you have, give 1 lakh to people with poor people who have no bank accounts? So first you embrace Aadhaar, which you were opposing. Now you will accept Aadhaar to implement it. Just see the difference between the soundbite and the reality. Although
Mr. Modi himself has not officially said he will embrace Aadhaar, reports in the papers for 2 or 3 weeks have suggested that the government is coming around to accepting it and continuing with it.
I'm glad. Government is in fact now accepting most of what the UPA did and praising it. But let me tell you another issue. If you give 1 lakh people, if the Planning Commission is right that there are 27 crore poor people in this country, then you need 27,000 crores.
And that is not affordable.
Where are you going to get it from?
That's not affordable.
Where are you going to get it from? Number 2, if that poverty figure actually is an underestimation and the number of poor people is 50 crores or 70 crores, you need 50,000 or 70,000 crores. So what's the point of making such an assertion on the ramparts of Red Fort when you don't even know where the money is going to come from?
A second thing that Mr. Modi said from the ramparts of the Red Fort was that he has promised that by Independence Day next year, that is in exactly 12 months' time, there will be a bathroom in every school where girls go. And he's called upon MPs and MLAs to use their MP lad funds for this. He's called upon industry to use corporate social responsibility funds. Will he succeed, or will the response be inadequate?
I think that his advisors have obviously not briefed him properly. There is a provision in the Right to Education Act which says that in every school in India there must be a separate toilet for girls and a separate toilet for boys.
But it hasn't been fulfilled as yet.
No, because they used to give money.
But he's now arranged for the money from MP lads and corporate social responsibility.
Where is the corporate social responsibility and MP lads? This has to be delivered on the ground under the scheme itself, which the government has adopted.
You're saying
with a 70-30 ratio.
You're saying a very important thing.
Yes.
You're saying that the hope that MPs and corporate social responsibility funds will be forthcoming will not be
No,
achieved.
MP funds are going to the develop a village. Where are the MP funds going to go to set up a bathroom?
He actually has asked for MP funds for this
the
purpose.
village.
You know, he's asked for MP funds for this specific purpose.
But how will it go to villages? That's what he says, that the MP lad fund should also go. MP should develop
So in
villages.
other words, there aren't enough MP funds for these purposes.
Exactly. Apart from that, you have a statutory commitment which you must fulfill under your budget.
So you're not impressed by this at all?
No, I'm very happy. This is a fundamental thing that must be done in India.
But you think it's unachievable the way
I
he's
don't
doing
even
it?
think it's unachievable.
Then what are you saying?
What we need is government commitment to do that.
But don't you see government
But
commitment
let's see
here?
how he must walk the talk. I would be very happy if it is done, because I am supporting this.
The third scheme that Mr. Modi announced was the Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana, where each MP is going to be required to adopt a village and make it a model village. Do you see that as a good idea or as a gimmick?
That's our program again. The Pradhan Mantri Adarsh Yojana, it was set up by us, 1,000 villages. The pilot project in 2009-10
but did you
with an
require,
allocation of 10 lakhs.
Did you require MPs to adopt villages and personally ensure they become model?
We didn't require, but it was part of a policy of a whole program, under which 1,000 villages were identified as a policy.
So this is a redressal of your policy?
Yes, a pilot project in 4 states, in Bihar, in Rajasthan and in Assam, and
let me stop you there.
Yes.
What you're saying once again is Mr. Modi has borrowed your clothes.
Yes, and not only that, in 2000, in the 12th plan, what was expected was that 5 million for each village, covering 44,000 villages.
The important thing in Mr. Modi's version of your old idea is that he's asked each MP to adopt a village and give that MP responsibility.
How will an MP do it? He'll have to go to the district administration, even if he uses the MP lad fund, because the MP lad fund can't be used directly. He has to go to the district administration. District administration will prepare the plan. But you already have a yojana.
So you're saying giving the initiative to MPs doesn't mean you'd have better results,
exactly.
But MPs will be hamstrung by problems
you have a
you're
yojana covering 44,000 villages under the 12th plan.
So this scheme is not likely to succeed.
Again, it's not new. Again, it's not new. It's something
neither new, but also you're saying not likely to succeed.
It may not. I mean, I don't know how he... See, I want to see how he walks the talk. It's saying one thing on the ramparts of Red Fort.
Doing is another.
Doing is another.
All right, Kapil Sibal, let's take a break at that point. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the important social issues the Prime Minister raised and ask you, how do you respond to that? We'll be back in a moment's time. Don't go away. Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth and an exclusive interview with one of the Congress Party's most senior politicians, Kapil Sibal. Mr. Sibal, let's come to the important social issues the Prime Minister raised. He spoke of the horror of rape. He spoke of the need for bathrooms so women don't have to wait till dark to go to the loo. He spoke about the skewed sex ratio. He spoke about the need and importance of cleanliness. Now, these are issues that have never featured before in Prime Ministerial speeches on Independence Day. How much credit do you give Mr. Modi for raising these issues?
I think these are exceptionally important issues, and I think if we are able to actually deal with these issues, it will do a lot of public good, and I'm very happy that that Modi has articulated that.
One of the
and I think I support that. I think this should be done. Whether he should have done it on this occasion or implement them otherwise is a separate issue.
When you say,
but these are at the...
When you say whether he should have done it on this occasion, are you saying this was the wrong occasion?
No, I didn't say that. I said that's a separate... You can debate on that. But I think these are very important issues and we must actually take them up seriously.
Now, when he was talking of rape, the Prime Minister said something that in fact politicians have never said before in public. First of all, he said parents have to change their attitude and the way they bring up their sons. And secondly, he said every rapist is someone's son. Those parents need to take responsibility. Sure. Was that well said?
Of course it was well said. But the question is, how do these words bring about social reform? See, these are wonderful words, and all responsible politicians must publicly air them. But what we need is reform. Words do not bring about reform.
What Mr. Modi was hoping to do in his grandfatherly way, because he adopted a sort of grandfatherly tone of admonition or chiding, is to impress upon people's moral conscience
Yes, of course.
that they need to change.
It's a good thing.
Do you think he'll work?
It's a good thing.
Do you
Whether
think
it
he'll
works or
succeed?
not, I don't know. It's a good thing. You know, when Sati was abolished, exactly the same thing happened. But for many, many
Well, you're
years,
going back to
Sati continued.
1825 and Bentinck.
Sati continued for many years. Widow remarriage, opposed, but continued for several years.
So are you saying
So
that
what's the
Mr.
social
Modi
reform?
will be heard but not listened to?
No, I don't know, but I'm just saying these are great words. But I think what we need is a social reform movement. Modi should actually, on the ground, take a lead in the social reform movement.
How?
I don't know. It is because he
needs to work out how.
He needs to work, yes, on how.
So you're saying this is a good first step, but it's not sufficient?
It cannot be. Words are never a panacea for anything.
You're saying
it's deeds which are a panacea.
You're saying the Prime Minister needs to personally launch a social movement to tackle these issues?
Yes, he must match his words with his deeds.
One of the things he did say was that the best way of marking Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birth anniversary was to eliminate dirt and filth.
Absolutely right.
But once again, do you think those words are going to fall on deaf ears?
But how do you eliminate dirt and filth from the pestilence that is going on in urban areas in this country?
Once again, he must
the municipal corporation will...
Once again, he must launch a social movement.
Exactly, because this is not something that happens with words.
So this is the point at which the Prime Minister has to move from being a politician to a social
As I
activist.
said, great sound bites, very attractive, but he must walk the talk.
All right.
He must convince people that he means and delivers on what he says.
Let's come to some things the Prime Minister didn't say in his speech. To begin with, he said nothing about corruption. Were you surprised or were you relieved?
Totally surprised, because that was the basis on which he tried to bring out this government, and he succeeded. After all, we lost this election on much of the propaganda about corruption.
But can I...
And then there's a quietus on the Lokpal bill.
But can I point out something? If he had brought up corruption, it would have seemed as if he was once again attacking the Congress.
It's not a question of attacking. He said he will get rid of all members of parliament who have criminal cases against them, and he will start with the BJP. 3 months down the road, nothing has happened. In fact, he's got people who have got criminal cases in his cabinet. One of them is the president of the party.
You're talking about Megwal.
I don't want to.
Are you talking about Amit Shah?
I'm not doing. But this is the reality. So what's the point of saying all this and then not doing anything about it?
Something else that the Prime Minister didn't speak about was Pakistan and China.
I was shocked, because he talked about chicken biryani at the time when we were wanting to have talks, and he talked about our soldiers' heads being cut off, and now he's sending saris and he's sending shawls to Pakistan, and the foreign secretary is going. So what he said earlier is just the opposite of what he's trying to do today.
Do you welcome the change? Or
I always welcome negotiations, but point is, this was the basis of his attack on the UPA government.
So he's being inconsistent.
This is part of what if you look at Modi throughout his career, consistency is not a thread that flows.
One other thing. In his speech, the Prime Minister cited Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, Lal Bahadur Shastri, Jayaprakash Narayan, but notably, he didn't cite anyone from the RSS or BJP pantheon of greats.
Why, that's you have to ask him why he didn't. He didn't even cite anybody from the Gandhi family. He didn't cite.
He cited Mahatma Gandhi, he cited Sardar Patel.
Jawaharlal Nehru, Rajiv, he never cited anyone.
He cited Lal Bahadur Shastri, Sardar Patel, Mahatma Gandhi.
His visceral hatred for the Congress party is clear from whatever he does, whatever he says, and what he says and what he does. And you will see that reflected. And the other thing that I'm surprised about is black money. This was the basis of a lot of attack on the UPA. What happened to black money? What is he doing about it?
Do you not give him any credit for the fact that he didn't cite names like Deen Dayal Upadhyay, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, Veer Savarkar?
No,
because that could have been very divisive.
That's all right, but he may still.
But he didn't.
Doesn't matter. But in reality, he may still do whatever they.
So he gets no credit from you for that.
There's no question of credit. I don't give him either credit or lack of credit. I think this was a great, masterly, soundbite speech. I want to see what happens on the ground.
Kapil Sibal, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.